How's that?
The bad part is he edits all this out. So
I edit
he
it all
only
out.
gets in there what he wants in there.
Yeah. Exactly.
So
all right, so guys, here we are. We're with Chis Neal today from Columbia Forest Products, and we're just out cruising a little timber today, kind of looking around. He's going to kind of tell us a little bit about what he does day in the life of a forester.
All right, well, I'll go with what we're doing today. I'll call it reconning, which is basically we're just kind of out there seeing what's going on. And each landowner's got a different piece of parcel of land. Everything's different. So kind of looking at this is, okay, is it something we can harvest going forward? Is it viable for the landowner to do something with? So we're just kind of looking at what tree species are here, diameters, volume per acre, terrain, all those variables are in, if it's worthwhile with doing something for the landowner. So that's kind of the short end of it. And mostly today what we've seen is a lot of lower grade red oak, white oak, chestnut oak, black oak, scarlet oak's a big component out here, small amounts of poplar, very little of the other species, soft maple, hard maple, any of those. So just kind of looking at the terrain and where it's at, and that's kind of what we're doing today, and just seeing if that's value per acre is something that works for the landowner.
Gotcha.
So be it. So grade, we're looking at grade today, kind of with the in the terrain, not grade of timber, not grade of ground, but grade of timber, and it is a lot of lower grade. Old timers would refer to it as tie logs, a lot of tie logs, and we'll hear tie logs today, and plus flooring logs, things of that nature. Winds out here, so one of the dangers today is limbs falling out. So yeah, so that, I mean, it's just kind of taking into consideration, okay, if you do cut it, what's it going to be, what's the end use, so that kind of dictates what we're cutting, what we're looking at that way. Just different things of that nature.
So basically, as a process, let's say a landowner has some timber they'd like to have you come look at.
Mm-hmm.
What would be the process from kind of beginning in to working with you, as far as from them getting in their mind, hey, I'd like to timber some land, to a finished product?
Okay, so really at first it starts off just a phone call or just a contact, and generally it's not most foresters. So landowner contact us, we'll generally ask the questions, okay, where's it at, B1. When was the last time it was cut? That always helps. It's amazing how many people call and say, oh, it's never been cut, and you go out and it's all 6 inches in diameter because it hadn't been cut because it was a field the last 30 years. But we'll come out, we recon it, look at what's there, say, yeah, it's something we're interested in, and we'll come back and put a timber cruise on it, so we really get a hard numbers of what species are here, diameters, heights, again, logability, what's merchantable, what's not, with all those factors into it. Access, can you get it out, can you get to the road, everything of that nature. So once we do that, then we come up with a value. Then once we get that value, we get back to the landowner, discuss what the end result they're looking for.
Bless you.
Battling all the pollen out here today. So so once we get that number, then once we agree upon everything, we kind of put together a logging plan, go over that to the landowner. Here's how we're going to log it, this is what we're looking at. Then we'll do a timber contract, and then timber contract describes all that out and what's involved with that. Then we move the logger in. We got to register it with the state. We got to get that registered before they move in. Then the logger will come in, we'll build a truck road, we'll set our landing spot up, kind of lay out our skid roads, lay out a logging plan, then kind of put that plan on the ground. And once that part's done, logger's here, and we look after him, kind of as the contract is, help the logger with any issues he's having of locations, flag the boundary lines, we gotta get the boundary lines in so we don't cut on the neighbors. Once we get that, the loggers will be here in place. They'd be here cutting it, producing logs, pulpwood, peeler logs, everything that way. We monitor that as the whole job goes on. Once then they're done, when everything's finished and cut, we'll come back in and they got to reclaim everything to the Division of Forestry specs, and any other extra thing we put in the contract to landowner. Sometimes landowners want a certain area cut a little bit harder for a food plot. That seems to be a big thing nowadays. Do a lot of wildlife plots, so we do all the work with that, whatever's in the contract, put everything to rest and move on. Wait for the next time. So that's kind of the whole process in a nutshell.
So when the logs leave the job, as far as for you with Columbia, where do they go from there?
So we'll take all our peeler logs, we'll go to Craigsville, West Virginia, of course. But we also do some stuff with hardwoods there also, but we'll merchandise logs to other facilities that might have a higher value that we can help the landowner with in that purchase price. We need peeler logs to make interior plywood, and we do some flooring, we do some other little things that way. But in general, we'll merchandise every piece on the property for a maximum number to help us procure for our meal, which is the peelers. We'll maximize all those other material on the property for the landowner to get that price up to make it justifiable for them, and the service to them for that merchandising. So we can move logs on really in this time in industry all over the world. I mean, currently right now we do of course peelers at Craigsville, but we're also putting logs on trucks. Trucks are going to near Canada, up in Vermont, Maine. We'll send some there. We've got logs going to Kentucky. We've got logs going to port, which are going to China, Vietnam, Indonesia. Right now, I think that's the majority of them, but we ship logs kind of all over the world.
And we're in southern West Virginia right here. That's where we're at right now.
Yeah. So
yeah, very cool.
So yeah, I mean, it's a busy business, and it's become. It used to be our business was kind of local. We did everything domestic. Columbia, we're a domestic company because we're interior plywood, and that's what our business is, which is cabinets. Cabinets a big part of our business. If you flip your recliner over, there's wood underneath it. We do parts for that. That's the biggest part of our business, but we're pretty much a domestic company. We really don't export too much of our finished product, but we do some exporting of logs.
Now, when you would come in and cruise this, actually get a hard number cruise, what is involved with that?
Of course, mapping's the first part, and it depends on how big a parcel it is. There's different ways to cruise, but generally the two that we use mostly is 100% tally, where we'll go through and tally each individual tree. Generally that's on smaller parcels, 20, 30 acres or smaller. If it's a larger parcel, we'll do a point sample cruise, and we'll lay different grids by the size of the property and what's involved with that. And it's basically sampling either 10th or 20 acre plots all over a piece of property in a grid. And each of those plots we measure inside of a certain diameter from a plot center, and we'll tally each tree. We'll measure the diameter, breast height, and then we'll give that a log height, and if it's by species, and then we'll kind of make our notes too of if it's saw logs, if it's pile logs, anything of that nature, or veneer. I mean, look at veneer too. So kind of looking at that, and then while we're cruising, we're also adding in our head and in the track to logability, things to look for the logger. If there's water here, or power line, gas lines are big, anything of that nature. And also, we look at dead trees as danger trees, that to let the logger know the safety side of that, and what's the best way to lay in the skid trails to get that plan developed. And like we were talking earlier, some places that want to be developed for a housing development, we can lay our skid roads out for that so that we're roughed in, so when a building contractor comes in or a road contractor, he's already got those trees out of the way, things of that nature. So you got to take in every landowner's different end aspects.
So as far as landowners, what types of landowners the majority, like different classes you see that?
We at Columbia, we're pretty, here in West Virginia, we do a lot of private landowners, but there's some industrial landowners we do a fair amount with. So it's kind of a mix of everything. And honestly, like we talked a little bit earlier today, as sizes, we've cut some 5-acre parcels, but it just depends on the logger, what's growing on it, what's viable to move in, and all the costs associated with that. So using that in there, we've done everything from 5 acres to thousands of acres.
So you kind of work with maybe like a farmer that has a little plot of timber on his that he'd like to get a little money from that, or like a land holding company, a mining company or something.
That's right.
And then good deal.
So it's
then like even somebody wanted to develop something. So
that's right.
That line too. So
oh yeah, all walks of life. It's amazing the different people, because you end up running into local people that live on their parcel that they want to cut something, and for whatever reason they some people have held on to it for a long time. It's an investment. It's part of their retirement. Right. Other people are like, hey, I like the woods. I want to hunt, so I want to cut it to get the right thing back for that. So it's all different kinds of
goals in mind too.
It is. It really is.
And on that topic, so what do you end up seeing in our area in West Virginia, a typical rotation on cutting that, harvesting that timber?
It varies a lot. I mean, our old general term is about 20 years, but it honestly depends on what's growing there today. If it's a tract that hasn't been cut 50, 60 years, it's generally big diameters. So therefore there's not a lot of regeneration on it.
Right.
And I like to explain to a lot of people that don't do it every day. They might only have one timber sale in their lifetime, but kind of look at that as like a garden that you harvest every 20 years.
Exactly.
And if it's a different, it depends on what's growing there, where the aspect, meaning it's either a north-facing slope or south-facing. The timbers in the dirt's generally better on a north-facing, so your timber quality and the growth is better on a north face. And if it's been harvested through, you can kind of keep that rotation going every 15, 18 years.
Yeah.
Some of them I've done that you look at and you're like, it's not going to be cut again for 60 years because it's poor soils, large timber, not a lot of residual stands already there, so you're kind of starting over. And there's, you know, there's so many different ways to cut it. You can look at diameter limits, a marked stand, a thinning, a clear cut, and all those have their pros and cons, depends on where it's at. So a clear cut's it's not meant for everywhere, but there's some places we get into that it's been cut through, we'll say since the 1960s, every 15, 20 years, to the point now what's left is really a low grade stand that is probably beneficial for what's there to clear cut it and kind of start over.
It kind of gets a bad name, but it really does have a good purpose, placed right. Exactly.
And really in the last, I'm gonna say in the last 15 years, I had more landowners come and say, hey, you know, I like the deer hunt, or I like upland bird hunting, so I want to make that habitat. And for those species, some of the best things a chainsaw. I mean, it's we kind of joke about it, but that chainsaw can make more habitat than we can go out and work for days to put a food plot in. But that food plot's only going to produce certain times of the year. And on the flip side, there's people like, oh, I don't want to cut timber because that's where I hunt. Well, I don't want to cut the oak because that's what the deer eat. Well, in reality, those deer only eat that October, November, December.
Right.
Once that oak crop's gone, or if it didn't happen, you're gonna get mighty bored sitting out there watching nothing walk by. So by having that different types of habitat, you can increase the wildlife on a piece of property by having hedge and having some mature and having some browsy areas, because deer eat on browse year round. And you have more pollen and more brushy, so it's even better.
This pollen's wonderful.
Yeah.
We feel like we've been sandblasting our eyes all day.
Exactly.
But another question I get a lot of times, and I'm sure you get it, is why don't we ever replant trees in our area?
And it's a common question. And the easiest way to look at that is when a tree's cut down, the root system's there. Most species will regenerate from the stumps, and you got stump sprouts. So, and the residual seed source that's already underneath the leaf litter, that sometimes it needs that leaf litter broken up, it needs sunlight, it needs all that. And all species are different. There's some that are much more shade tolerant than others, so different things grow different ways. So really in our neck of the woods, all the hardwood trees will regenerate from stump sprouts or seeds in there. Pine's one that you got to replant, but you know, pine's not a big component of what we do around here, so you got to get kind of into the south where that happens. So.
Well, again, I appreciate you taking time and tell us a little bit about what you do and on a little mission here and some questions folks have. And again, thanks for your time. Oh yes,
Thanks for having me.
Oh, thanks a bunch. Appreciate it.
Thanks, man. Thanks.